In today's episode, we continue our series of interviews with the very tremendous Jared of the Feathers and Friends podcast. Stand by, true believers. Here comes another episode of You're Not My Father. Welcome back to You're Not My Father, the best family-friendly podcast from Alaska and this side of Anchorage. We don't know what the other people on the other side of Anchorage do. We don't live there anymore. I'm your host, Thomas Brando Greenman. I'm a father, a husband, and my curiosity and mistakes have given me a world of experiences that I want to share with you, and maybe even make you laugh. Our podcast is made for you to learn something positive, something that you can apply to your life as both a parent, a kid, or otherwise. Or maybe if you're a dog, like a pug, cute little pug, squishy face. So, without much further ado, let's do this. Today's show is sponsored by coffee. Not just a specific one, just plain old coffee in general, with a nice splash of Southern Pecan coffee creamer in it. If it wasn't for coffee, this would probably be a pretty lousy show. If you'd like to sponsor our show, or if you've got some money and you want to help us spread the word on your product, drop us a line at facebook.com/YNMF show or via email at ynmfshow@gmail.com. Hello, everyone. Today on You're Not My Father, I'm interviewing Jared from the Feathers and Friends podcast. And so we're going to be subjecting him to the fatherly interview questions and see what kind of wisdom he can share with us. So welcome to the show, Jared. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Thomas. Just kind of woke up, so I'm excited to be here, man.
Awesome. I know the just waking up feeling. I am working my way through coffee, and yeah, the early morning podcasts are both a challenge and a pleasure because of coffee. So tell us a little. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious because I'm looking at your little dingly thingy. It's making the moves up and down on Zencaster here, and mine's not. Is that normal that it's not doing it, or
That's a great question.
should I make sure?
No, I can see it.
Okay, it's moving on your end. Okay, I just want to make sure because I want to make sure that you're getting my audio, and I don't want to have to do a backup for you if I don't have to.
Yeah. So, for those of you that are listening, and if we are too lazy to edit, which is probably going to happen, we're using a product called Zencaster. And so what it does is it records audio independently. So spare you the technical details, but we're looking at the wavelengths. And so yeah, it looks like you're actually coming in pretty good. So
All right.
I think we're reading 5 by 5.
I've never said that in my life.
I know it sounds silly, but we were talking pre-show, and so we were talking about the military. So yeah, I'm also a movie kind of guy. So that I think very specifically, I picked that up from Aliens, not Alien, but Aliens.
Oh, Alien. Oh, okay, yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're coming into the planet, and the Space Marines are landing, and they're like something 5 by 5, and I'm like, what does 5 by 5 mean?
I should remember what it is. I really should because I know I've heard it plenty of times, but I think it's just their way of saying loud and clear,
Right.
or
Yeah.
whatever.
So Jared has a podcast called Feathers and Friends, and it's pretty interesting. So tell us about your podcast and maybe how you got started with that, and a little bit about you and what you do.
Yeah. So when the beautiful world crisis hit us way back in the day, my buddy was trying to get me into PC gaming, and right around when it started, I got into PC gaming. and I got my first PC, kind of started playing around with some things, and all of a sudden everyone's got to stay home. Nobody can go out and do anything. And I was like, all right, well, how am I going to stay in contact with my buddies? And I went out and I picked up a Blue Snowball Black Ice microphone that I've been using ever since I started. And I was like, I'm going to do my own podcast. I researched into it. And at first it was like, let's just talk about video games. It's what I like, and it gives me an outlet to just ramble. And it's kind of morphed into this more or less thing of where now I just find random things on the internet that I want to talk about and I go from there. And that's kind of what I ended up doing. So, if you listen to my beautiful voice ramble, you'll hear some interviews of some women out there. I talked to some OnlyFans. I've talked to some Starbucks employees here recently. I've got a buddy from the military that comes on all the time. I've got another buddy who lives out in Nevada who's got his own show. And a lot of it is just me trying to find a topic or something that I'm interested in and running with it, if that makes sense at all.
It makes perfect sense. I like hearing from people of all walks of life. As a matter of fact, the more diverse, to me, that's the more interesting aspect of it. You know, I don't want to hear from people that I see on a regular basis, because what's interesting about that? So I
Yeah.
totally get it. So why Feathers and Friends? Tell us, why that name?
Yeah, so the show kind of started off as Parrot Gaming Productions, and it was a bit of a mouthful, and it was just almost too much for me to kind of handle, and so I kind of went on like a 2 year journey to figure out how in the devil I'm gonna shorten the name, because people would ask, "Oh, what's your podcast?" "Oh, Parrot Gaming Productions." It's like, yeah, let's maybe find a shorter version of that. And I realized I've been interviewing a lot of people, and I realized that I've been talking to a lot of different people. So I was like, well, let's continue the parrot theme and keep it Feathers and Friends. And so it was just kind of the birds and the flock, and just kind of being, birds of a feather flock together, I guess, is the kind of terminology that I came up with. And it's like, all right, Feathers and Friends, let's go with it. So that was pretty much how it started.
The more I hear it, the more it kind of sounds like a talk show. It's like, I hate to say it, but Fox and Friends, or there's a lot of shows that have and Friends type of uh, moniker in there. And the only reason why I say Fox and Friends is because I think that
It's one of the
it
well-known
is one of the
shows out
well-known
there.
shows,
Yeah.
and I think at one point in time, I think whenever the Gulf War started, that show was around, and Fox wasn't as polarizing as it is now. Um, so, so Jared's had a chance to look at our list of questions, so we're going to dive right into some of those. Um, so, number one, we'll ask this one: how important do you think having a father in your life is?
It was kind of one of the things that you said earlier that was kind of nice, that I thought was pretty cool. Doesn't matter what gender your father is, it just matters that you have a fatherly figure in your life. And I feel that it's super important, because I was lucky enough to not only be adopted, but also my parents divorced and remarried
Hmm.
individuals. My dad remarried a very young girl, and then my mom kind of remarried a guy around the same age as her. And it was always kind of interesting, because my adopted dad would kind of teach me what not to do, and then my stepdad kind of helped guide me a little bit more in life. And it was kind of cool, because I feel like I had a little bit of a cheat
Yeah.
code, if you will. But I think, to answer your question, yes, is very, very important to have a fatherly figure in your
So,
life.
whenever I was growing up, my parents divorced, and they didn't really remarry. My father remarried at one point, but he was busy. He was law enforcement, military. He just was never home. Not that he was a bad guy, but he was doing his best to take care of us, pay child support, that type of
Hmm.
stuff. So I've heard similar scenarios where people, their parents have gotten divorced, and they get remarried. It sounds like you actually got the best of both worlds, so to speak. You had multiple father figures in your life in a way. Um, do you feel like you were kind of, forgive the term, blessed, by having, that
Hmm.
much influence in your life?
The answer, yeah. Simply, yeah. Just because I had so many different friends and, I had so many different moms out there, and then I would have like fatherly moments with my buddies, friends, and then I was military as well too. Um, and I was law enforcement in the military, so I had many father figures in the military as well too, and it it's really nice to kind of draw upon all of that knowledge to try to create somebody that you want to become
That's
in the future.
awesome. Kind of jealous, but in a good way. Um,
Hmm.
so with all this influence that you had in your life, what's probably the best advice one of your fathers gave you?
It would actually have to be my actual
Okay.
dad. Well, my I call him my actual dad, but he was my adoptive dad. The greatest advice that he ever gave me was, um, do unto others as you would have them
Hmm.
do unto you. And then another little gold nugget is when driving, don't hit anyone or anything. Like I turned 16 and he's like, all right, I'm gonna teach you how to drive. And my first trip was to the bar because he's
Okay.
an alcoholic. But I know that went
That's
dark really
okay.
fast. But like he's like, all right, he gave me the keys, got in the car with a beer, and he's like, all right, golden rule number one, don't hit anyone or anything. I was like, all right, can do, dad. So yeah, it was yeah, that was the greatest piece of
You know,
advice I've gotten.
I don't even see that as dark. Part of it is, but from my perspective, I think one of the things that makes fatherly advice, interesting and funny to talk about is stuff just like that, where, it's,
Hmm.
is it, is it right? Is it appropriate? No, but that's kind of how fathers have kind of been doing things for millennia. It's just kind of one of those things. It's like,
Hmm. Yeah.
don't do as I do, do as I say. Um, so, what's the best skill that your father or one of those father figures taught you in life? Hopefully, they taught you something besides driving.
Yeah. Uh, one of the one of the kind of great things that well, it's kind of two bits here because my real dad, he was really good at kind of spotting crazy. He was really kind of good at attracting the type of individuals that you may not want to bring home to mom
Gotcha.
and dad. You might not want to hang out with some of these interesting individuals. And I kind of grew up in a bar, so I kind of got to know a lot of uh, in the military it was called
Hmm.
verbal judo. And just kind of you learn to read people's body language, you learn to read their language, you learn how to address the situation and figure out what somebody's doing without kind of letting them know what they're doing, or letting them know what you're doing. And it's really kind of nice because it was the ability to read people and understand, that old fatherly adage here, don't stick your
Right.
thing in crazy, because crazy might just stick you
Right.
back. So and then I had my stepdad had the gift of gab. He was a salesperson as well too. So I really learned the skills of like negotiation and just talking in an environment to where, okay, this is what I can say. This is gonna have a good result, or this might have a bad result, and just kind of knowing what to say, how to say it, and when to say it. So those were two very very valuable skills that I've learned that I'm still putting in practice here today.
That's
So.
awesome. That ability to read people. Um, I can just imagine. I hear the words military, and I hear the words law enforcement, and you start talking about that type of stuff, and all I can think of is like similar experience. Like, why are we sitting
Mhm.
in up against the wall, Dad? Why do we always go sit here? Why are you always like focused on everybody that comes into the room? That type of stuff. So, very very similar experience. I don't know if my dad was much of a talker.
Not a
Um, Probably still really isn't. I don't know where I caught the gift of gab. But yeah, these are really awesome skills because being able to understand something that's going on before it happens. You know, I think you quote a Star Wars thing. That's a Jedi trait, but it's but it is really useful. If you can predict something
Mhm.
that's going to happen, you can calculate the next move like a game of chess, and that's one of the best pieces of advice my dad gave me was to treat everything like a game of chess, think several moves ahead, and try to anticipate what's going to happen. Um, and he basically told me that with driving, number one, but more of life. And so I've always kind of tried to
Hmm.
think of that in that way is to be more strategic. Um, but I don't think I ever used the word strategic until my wife made me take a Clifton Strengths assessment, and she was like, "I told you, I told you." I was like, "You told me what?" And she's like, "You're just one of those thinker guys," and I'm pretty sure she'd smack me up against the head for saying, trying to paraphrase her like she's an idiot, but she's not. But yeah,
I feel you on that. That's actually one of my really, really good friends who's out of Canada, believe it or not. She's out of Vancouver. That's one of the things that she absolutely loves about me is that I, because of the military, I come at things from a very, very logical standpoint. I know that's a phrase many people don't ever hear in association with
military
military and
intelligence.
logic. Um, yeah, military intelligence. But I think very logically about things, especially if it's not my own issues that I have to take into consideration. And like, I mean, I get a call like like once a week from her, where all of a sudden it's just me and her talking, and she's like, "Hey, I have a question, Jared." It's like, "All right, go ahead and shoot, Natalie." And all of a sudden, she's got this problem in life, and I can hear that she's kind of coming at from, and I hate to be cliche here, but she's like kind of coming at it from a bit of an emotional standpoint and kind of viewing things, a little bit more inside the box. And that's where I come into play. Is I'm that thinker as well too. I like to tinker with ideas, and I try to think of what's causing it, why is it causing it, and even if it is an emotional response, think about it logically, because that's how you're gonna have to approach it. And I've helped her solve a lot of problems, and it's kind of cool to be that thinker, because at that time you get to impress people with your thoughts and how you think through things.
Yeah,
So
I totally agree. I think that's another thing we share in common. I do try to think about things logically. My wife, oh God, I hope she doesn't listen to this. She usually doesn't. So I think we're safe. I'm safe.
no, she'll probably
Yeah,
listen to this episode. This will be the one
prob-
she listens to.
probably.
So
But she definitely classifies herself as more the emotional counterpoint in the family, and I'm the more logical one. And sometimes she'll get upset, and sometimes it's hard for me to understand if she's upset at me, but she's upset that she gets emotional and that she wants to be more
mhm.
logical, and I'm like, I'm just scared. She's a black belt in taekwondo, and my daughter is a second degree black belt, and my son is getting that path. So like everybody in my family knows how to kill somebody, and it's like, I'm glad you're on my team.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, Taekwondo is actually very defensive. A lot of it is defensive. So if you don't go on the offensive, I think you have a very strong
Well,
chance.
so the I forget what it's called. I think in Korean it's Don John or Don something, not Don Johnson.
Hmm.
But they actually have been teaching them more offensive stuff. So I think their master,
Oh, really?
he's he's pretty high up there as far as um, I guess Korean Taekwondo, but there's Hapkido and other things, and so he
Oh,
blends some of that
okay.
stuff
So
once they get past that first black belt or Dan level or Gup or I
yeah, the,
I
the Dan
forget, but
levels.
like
Yeah.
they get into other stuff as well. Um, so my son's not learning any of that. Like he's just doing his forms and whatnot. But the girls are into really crazy stuff. But I want them to be scary. We actually have a Krav Maga
Hmm.
studio, I guess, here in town. And so that's one of the things that I want to get them cross trained in Krav Maga. So that way, like, not only are they deadly, but like they're efficient. It's like, okay, I need to kill somebody. I can do it in 5 seconds.
That was actually part of some of our initial training. Combat 101 was actually a wide variety of some different types of Krav Maga that were out there. You want to talk about the speed, violence of action, and just the brutality. Krav Maga is most definitely the way to go. And it also goes to show just how long I've been out of Taekwondo. I mean, I've been out of Taekwondo for like I think like 20
Wow.
years now. So like that's what I remember when I got my green belt, and then I was done with high school. So I was like, all right, it's just it's pure defense. So I was like, that's not what I want. But yeah, Krav Maga will teach you some very
Yeah,
effective
my dad,
moves.
he would teach me various different. Well, I would say he'd teach me. A lot of times, I was just the punching dummy. Um, I learned by failure, but he teach me
Yeah.
some rather quick and effective things. He pepper sprayed me one time. After college, um, we were doing.
How fun was
It
that?
was not fun, not at all. But afterwards, I did learn that if you pepper spray hot dogs, they taste okay. So I mean, eating a hot dog.
I know, right? Isn't it kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
tasty sometimes?
But he'd pull out, Tonfa, PR-24, that type of stuff, and he'd be like, "Come at me," and it's like
Mhm.
that's not the best advice. But of course, like you're like, "Okay, I can take you, old man," and then it's like you're on the ground, you're on the ground, you're on the ground, and it's like ground's kind of nice. I'm just gonna stay down here for a little while, and
Hey, the old man had to make sure that you weren't gunning for him
yeah,
anytime soon. Let him know early. Let him know early and young. Hey, you can't take me, son. I still
yeah.
got you.
I think that as far as the skill goes, he probably taught me the real value of opportunity cost. It's like you're gonna do something. Is it worth it? You know
Hmm.
that type of thing. So yeah. Um, but I'm sure we could fill in a whole show about that type of stuff. Let's move on to how important is family to you now? Like as it sits, today's Jared. How important is family to you?
That's kind of a mixed bag of nuts. Because there are some points of contention that I have with my dad that like I'm just actually now starting to reach through and kind of guide through because there's a massive event with my stepmom, and I guess kind of give you guys the very TLDR. My stepmom has hated my guts for a very very long time, and just recently, like literally over Christmas, she hits me up and she's like, "Hey Jared, I heard about that other podcast you're a part of, Shorts and Hoodies. We heard the first interview. You sounded really really good." And it was like, first off, Mom, why are you talking to me? Secondly, why are you so interested in? You never really spoke to me before, and so I don't know what dynamic has changed with my dad and my stepmom, but like I'm kind of trying to reintroduce my life into them, and it's kind of nice. So family is important, but also at the same time, it can be very weird and
That's
strange.
great. For a second there, from the way that you were saying it, it almost seemed like you were like, no, I don't want you in my life. But the last part was like, hey, I'm working through this,
Yeah,
and that's awesome. I think I do a lot of recollection and try to replay these past events in my life, and um, I kind of liken it to like the like football, where the coaches are playing
hmm
these films and
hmm
they're like, well, how could I do better, or where did I screw up, and that type of stuff. And honestly, for a long time
yeah,
that I didn't think that those things were healthy for me, and I tried to avoid them. But I I I think self introspection is important to our growth, and I think as we get older, and I am older now, um, like you start to realize that you don't have much time left. The time ahead is probably far less than what you had before. You know, and
yeah,
the things that you've done in your past are typically pretty silly or naive, and maybe you just were completely wrong. And so I I always feel like there's there should be a redemption path for everybody. And so it's to me, I'm proud of you that you had this not a ideal relationship, and you're kind of bringing it back and working through it and trying to do something with it. Where like I'll give you an example. My sister, she's written off our family almost 100%. and she has no
Hmm.
interest in coming back to talking to anybody for anything. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter what it is, death, births, anything like that. And it's always been a sad point for me because I would love to have her back, but at this point, it's in her ball court. I've been emotional about it, and at this point, it's like if you come back, great, and if you don't, well, that's great too. I've got a family to take care of.
Yeah. I mean, I used to talk to my mom all the time about it just because my stepmom hated me for, and I never knew the reason why. Like, I would always kind of expect my dad to tell me why, or maybe even my mom to tell me why, my stepmom to tell me why. And there was just, I mean, I kind of had an inkling of what it was. I wasn't always 100% sure, but for like 3 years, I just killed her with kindness. The last like 3 years, I killed her
Yeah,
with kindness, and then I just kind of I hit your point, Thomas, where I was just like, I'm done. I was like, and I had a conversation with my mom and my stepdad once, where my mom was like, "Well, how's your dad?" I was like, "I don't talk to him. You know, he knows how to fix the situation. If he wants to approach me and fix it, he knows how to do it." Um, that was always kind of the biggest thing, is that he needs to reach out to me. He needs to make Robin either respect me as his eldest and respect me as a family member, and approach me as a normal human being would, or they can go be themselves where they live and live in that little isolated area. And I'll come out for Christmas, I'll come out for Thanksgiving, whichever one I'm not with, my mom and my stepdad on, and I will play the part of eldest son, and they know how to fix it if they want. And then I came out for Christmas this last year after kind of giving up on them for about a year or so. And it was just like a complete 180. Like, my stepmom was just so interested in me, and I was very taken aback. I didn't know if this was a ploy, if this was a plot. So I called up my little brother Yoshi, and I'm like, Yosh, what is she doing? Why is this happening? And he's like, dude, and he kind of gave me a little bit of rundown, and not to throw anybody's life out there, but she had a very life altering moment with the beautiful pandemic that has been out there. And apparently, she had a coming to Jesus moment, as my little brother Yoshi kind of put it. And all of a sudden, just that was around the time when my dad started to reach out to me a little bit more. That was where the Christmas invite came into, where he really wanted to see me, even though we just saw each other over Thanksgiving. And I was just like, all right, I'm ready to accept this. I'm ready to come back. I'm excited to come back. And I've been making a very concerted effort over the last couple of weeks to just kind of get back in touch with him, and reestablish that father son relationship. uh so.
that's really interesting, and a wonderful story to hear. I'm gonna sidetrack. I'm gonna create another question here. So, you know,
Hmm.
it sounds like to me like COVID has changed your family dynamic in a lot of different ways. Um, Tell us a little bit more about like maybe anything else that you've seen COVID change for your family and the way that you guys interact with each other, or maybe even talk. I mean, do you talk to them more frequently because COVID's been going on, or is it less, or what would you say?
Well, it's kind of funny because my mom is always, because I have three brothers, Cherry and Yoshi. Those are their nicknames. Because I don't ever know if they want me to throw their real names out there. But it's hilarious because, like, my mom would always say that we have our dad's trait of not being very communicative, which is kind of interesting. Because like we would go months without talking to our mom. We would go months. I mean, there was a point in time where we went 6 months without talking to each other as brothers, and I was like, I called up Yoshi and I did a three-way phone call with Cherry as well too, and we're like, we haven't talked in forever. And when COVID kind of hit, we started to do like a text thread, and I was out there, throwing the text messages. I was calling everybody all the time. I was really trying to spark up that communication, because like I was isolated for the first time in my life. Um, like, to be honest with you, I used to go to the grocery store all the time. Like, the way that I used to grocery shop was I would shop for the day, that I felt like I was wasting less, saving a little bit more money as well too. And then when the pandemic hit, I didn't have that social aspect where I could maybe flirt with the cashier, or maybe just talk sports with the cashier, the guy there, because he was wearing a Packers hat or something like that. And my social aspect kind of dwindled because everyone started staying inside. And so what better way to reconnect with your family than now when everybody has to stay inside and do everything? And as the pandemic has kind of progressed, I've noticed that my mom, who was a top nurse, like she ran nurse wards in hospitals, she's kind of become a little bit more relaxed now that she's retired. It was no more like, oh, maybe stay 6 feet away or whatever, now that we've all got, vaccinated and the booster shots and everything else like that. Like everybody's kind of, we're kind of back into that same rhythm that we were before. So, I mean, there was a major shift in the beginning, but once reality is kind of somewhat better restored, depending upon your viewpoint of the corona, I'll let you make that decision yourselves. But as some people feel like we come back more into normal society, so as we kind of, like I was saying, get back into that normal society, I've noticed that, things are kind of falling back on the we're not talking as much as I would like, but again, we are still talking, at least fairly regularly, so that's always a positive for me, if that answers the question
It
well for you.
does, and that's actually a great answer. For me, I think that the pandemic has done two things. It's like um, it's made me care less, and it's made me care more.
Hmm.
And I'll explain that. So basically, I mean, like the pandemic has just kind of made me think, what am I doing with my life, and what is my life really about? And I
Hmm.
don't have time to waste. So making me care more about family has definitely been the flip side of that, because it's made me realize what's important. But it's also made me care less about things that just are not important. Um, Running a business has been a challenge. I've grown in responsibilities now. I'm a co-owner, and honestly, it should scare the crap out of me more often than not. But for the past 2 years, I'm just like, what's the worst thing that could happen? If as long as my kids are healthy and our family is still together, if our house burns down, it sucks. It would suck, but we'd still be together. If the business
Yeah.
fails for whatever reason, we'd still be together. If we're living in a in a van down by the river, you know, it's still fine because we're still together.
Yeah.
Sometimes me and my wife will have an argument, and she will go she'll go down swinging for just about anything she believes in, no matter. Oh god, she's really gonna kill me for this one. For anything, it doesn't matter how small it is. But for me, it's I kind of have that old school biblical mentality. It's like, if your eye offends you, pluck it out. It's
Hmm.
like, okay, well, you know, the house is bothering. We're arguing about the house. It's like, I'll burn the house down. I don't care. It's like, get rid of it. Here's what matters to me. It's you matter to me, and the kids
Yeah.
matter to me. Everything else just is something else. So I think COVID's just kind of really focused me in on those types of things. But um, I don't know. I've talked to a few people, and then there's people that I've wanted to talk to, and I'm just like, no, I don't care. I really don't. It's like, I haven't talked to them in this many years, and because it's a two-way street. It's
Hmm.
like,
Exactly. Yeah.
whatever. It's like, you know. So yeah, I mean, COVID has been this huge thing, but I honestly don't like talking about COVID because everybody talks about it.
I know. Yeah. Everybody, there's always some way to sneak it in or something crazy like that. It's been done and here and gone. Let's move on.
Right. Um, so I don't know much about you really at
Hmm.
all outside of what we've talked about here today. Um, did your family want you to have kids early, or wait until later on, or where do they sit on you having children?
Uh, well, I will say this. I have solved that problem
Oh,
quite extensively. Um, I cannot have children unless the body miraculously decides to repair myself.
okay.
Um, I knew I didn't want kids to begin with, but I do have a child. He
Okay.
lives with his mother up in New York, and one of the interesting things that I know I will probably catch flack from, and you will probably most likely, uh, oh, what is that word here? Judge me on this.
I
Um,
doubt it, but go ahead.
I have not seen my child, and he is 12 in a little bit, actually. Yeah,
Wow.
he turns 12 in a couple of days. Um, early on, this was actually an affair I had,
Mm-hmm.
and I was married at the time. I was very young, very stupid. I was 22, and his mom came on to me like very, very strong. It was very weird. Like I got married, and all these women came into the woodwork, and then as I was getting in the process of a divorce, she started coming on to me really, really hard. And, as a guy going through a divorce in the military, especially with some of the women that you were talking to, all of a sudden this girl is showing lots and lots of interest. She's just being overtly sexual in nature towards you. At some point in time, your morals can continue to stand up or they don't. And obviously, I lost that battle. I finally gave in. I was like, you know what? I need physical attention, and I got some. And then there was a lot of drama. Just like you could probably feel a Jerry Springer couple episodes with the drama that went on. And his mom and I do not see eye to eye in the least bit, one bit. And for a number of years, I fought. Like I tried my heart out. And then most recently here, we had another conversation. I thought maybe, oh, time could heal all wounds, like they say out there. Nope. um because he got into a fight at school and she felt the need to tell me about it, and he didn't start it, but he sure as heck finished it. And I was like, good, it's good, the other kid deserved it. You don't come on strong and then expect not to get try not to, if you can't cash a check, don't try to cash it, and the kid tried to cash a check that he couldn't handle, and my son handled him. And his mom thought I was completely inaccurate. I was completely wrong. I didn't, that's not the way you handle things. I was like, no, he did exactly what he was supposed to do. He didn't start it, but he sure as heck finished it. And we are just so incompatible on so many fronts. I just kind of wait for the day that he turns 18 so I can talk to him, man to man about things and be like, hey, look, this is your dad's perspective. You can either take it or leave it. You are your own man, make your own decision. And she says that he's very analytical like I am. He's very a copy paste of who I am. So I'm hoping he gets that analytical thinker side of me, which would be really, really nice, because then I don't have to worry too much about anything. So that way, when I have that man to man with him, he'll understand. But yeah, my mom is not happy about that situation. Obviously, she wanted me to have kids. She wanted me to have more kids, and the fact that I can't have kids is pretty no bueno. My dad, my stepmom, and my stepmom and my dad think it's pretty okay. My stepdad actually gave me a high five after I told him I had the operation, and he thought it was really cool. But yeah, that's kind of that's where Jared is. So I'm right there. I do what I'm supposed to do as best as I possibly can in the realm of things I'm willing to fight for going forward. So there you go. I just put it all out there for everyone.
Well, I can tell you this. I don't judge you at all. I mean, if anything, I actually have an incredibly similar story. Yeah, and maybe I won't get into all details, but I'll give it to you in brief. So I am on my second marriage. And so I've
Okay.
been married to my wife for, I think it's at least 15 years. If she's going to kill me about the other things in here, might as well go ahead and add another one to the fire.
Spill the tea, brother. Spill the tea.
Yeah. Um, but I was married before. I got married, I think, when I was 25 or something like that. But anyway, we were young, and yeah, first marriages, starter marriages, and whatnot.
Hmm.
But I took it really seriously. I'm not a person that plays around with convictions, and if I'm committed to something, I'm committed to it. But we're all stupid. We all have our flaws. We're human, and you know, I don't think our marriage really was working out, and I don't think we're really communicating. But she started having an affair with a police officer, and
Oh, goody.
I tried to make it work, and it just it wasn't. And I think probably the reason why she drifted away from me is because religiously I was kind of moving in a different direction, and
Mm.
her father was a Methodist minister, and I don't know. I mean, I,
And
I
cheating on a
really
police
never.
officer was very high and mighty of her. I will applaud her on that. That was sarcasm for all
Yeah.
those of you who don't know.
Yeah, but yeah, I didn't want to divorce. I really wanted to make it work, and
Mhm.
it only made me more um, convinced that I've made this commitment to her. I made this commitment to God, and you know, religious things aside, and, it was pretty devastating for me. I had moved so far away from home, and I was still away, and yeah, it was a big deal to me. But I'm going through this divorce, and I'm working IT at this one company, and one of my customers was pretty friendly to me, and she kept talking to me, and she kept kind of inserting herself into my life, whether I liked it or not. And I was just kind of, I was vulnerable, and I was just like, okay. And she kept inviting herself over to my house, and one thing led to another, and we had this relationship. And yeah, at some point, she told me she was pregnant, and it was super scary for me. I was very emotionally shot. I mean, I don't want to use the word PTSD, because I feel like that's something that
It
I
comes in
don't
all
know.
shapes and sizes, Thomas. It really
Yeah,
does. You can get PTSD from a dog attacking you. You can get PTSD from falling downstairs. It happens if you have a traumatic event in your life, and yours was finding out you're going to be a father. And that
yeah,
can scare the ever living nonsense out of a lot of people. Don't worry about it, man. You're good. You're good.
yeah. It did. And the first thing that I kind of went for was, you've got to have an abortion. And she didn't want it, and I was trying to convince her. And then at some point, I just kind of accepted it. But for her, in her mind, it was some big whatever, and we never kind of reconciled. And then come to find out that she wasn't divorced; she was still married. And it was
Wow.
yeah, it was really really crazy. And then you know like, I wanted to take care of this child. I wanted to be involved in this child's life, and she didn't want to have anything to do with me all of a sudden. And it was just really, really kind of bizarre. And she would never talk to me. She ignored every phone call, absolutely just whatever. And so I didn't know if this was some kind of ploy, because she had told me that, her ex-husband or her husband or whatever had always
Hmm.
wanted to have a boy, but they couldn't have a boy. They tried to get pregnant. So I didn't know if this was like some kind of, like, she was using me, and there were other people involved, and I didn't know, and I never had the answers. And so he was born, and I didn't know. And yeah, I was poor, so I couldn't force the issue and go to
Yeah.
court or anything else like that. Um, so yeah, so I mean, just time kind of rolls on, and maybe he's my son, maybe he's not. And so fast forward to 2010, my daughter's about to be born, and I get served this paperwork,
Oh,
and
fantastic.
they're like, you owe all this back child support, and we need to do a DNA test, and then they fingerprint me, and I feel like a criminal. I really
Hmm.
do. And then come to find out, well, that day I told my wife, I need you to come home. I need you to leave work. I'm leaving work. We need to talk. And I told her some of that stuff, but we didn't really get into it, because what did I really know?
Hmm.
And so we had this long talk, and she was fine with it, and we're like, we'll get through it, and like a few days later, my daughter's born, and I've got this other thing, piled on top of me. And so, long story short, I tried to talk to the mother, and she was willing to indulge me in that for a little while, but she became combative, like, almost immediately. And I was trying to be logical, because, again, like, I have a newborn child. I don't know
Yeah.
what else is going on.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
long story short, I've never talked to him ever. I think he's probably about 18, or close to 18 now. And I signed away my parental rights, because we were struggling financially, and she had been through, I don't know how many guys, and I think at some point she found a really decent guy, was married to him. I was like, if something happens, who's going to take care of him?
Hmm.
So anyway, long story short, her current husband, to my knowledge, officially adopted him. I'm not paying child support, but she would never let me talk to him. So I kind of joke in the show intro, I'm not your father. It's like, unless I am. And
Yeah,
because I don't know, maybe at some point, maybe he might listen to this. I've always wanted to have a relationship with him, but, um, the fear of his mother and, the poison that she's probably put in his mind about me, is probably being like this worst deadbeat dad ever and who would never care about you or whatever. I just, yeah. So
yeah, I feel that
I
because
don't
that's
judge you at all. I mean, it's it's
yeah,
it's kind of strange to hear, hey, we've got a, there's some commonality here, and then wow, here's something incredibly common that we have, or uncommon that we have. So
that's yeah, because like I remember when I was 16, like I got interested in my adopted, in my birth parents, and I have a feeling that even though the toxicity that his mom may or may not spew towards my child, that's one thing that I will always just kind of go, I hope that he's a critical thinker like I am. I think that he can think for himself. And that's why when I was 16, I wanted to find out about my adoptive parents. And I feel like he's going to have that curiosity that eats away at him, just like it
yeah,
ate away at me. And at the age of 18, he's probably going to do something about it. And that way, when he comes over and we have that conversation, he's going to go, I get it, Dad. I get it. And then he's a grown man and he can make his own decisions. And I hope the same for you, Thomas. I really do. That if he is 18, or older, that he can have that conversation with you. Because I had the same exact thing happen. I thought for the longest time I wasn't the father until 3 years later. I was about to deploy. I get served some papers. I go get checked out. Yep, it's my kid. I'm literally I'm 2 days away from getting on a plane going overseas to the Middle East. They're like, you have to show up for court. And it's like, I can't. I'm gone. And social services actually was kind enough to handle it for me. And they helped me out with everything. And the military did a phenomenal job lifting me up, getting on my back pay child support that I needed to the mother. But I had something very similar happen where I had no idea for the longest time because of drama. That's just it's not worth bringing up. But yeah, I'm right there with you, big guy. Right there with you.
yeah, it's a challenge. I don't share your optimism in that my biological son will understand. I have a I mean, it'd be great if he did, but I don't know. But part of me is really my kids. I mean, that's the biggest part of my life, I think. Um, you know, I don't know. It's a problematic part of like my family equation. I've told my kids about it at a younger age, but it's like, where's the instruction manual for this kind of dynamic? Like my dad doesn't have really great advice. And so I think if anybody's listening to this podcast and they're in a similar situation, maybe our insights and advice will help kind of guide them in that, because I've never seen instruction manual or a
There is
military
none.
manual that explains, this type of scenario. Although you would think that is probably as much as it happens in the military, and that's a stereotype that the DoD would create a manual for this type of thing.
Oh, I bet I guarantee you some finance person's like, oh, okay, single father, blah 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 blah. Okay, go to this next. Okay, all right, yeah, this is your situation. They got a handbook. They just don't want to hand it out. Um,
Yeah,
and yeah, you're right. This stuff happens all the time in the military, just because I mean, we are technically 1% of the American population, and whether it's because we're the degenerates, whether we think we can change the world from the inside out, or whether we are just thrill seekers who want to go out and hold guns and stuff, these things happen because our life. I mean, I can't tell you, I deployed 5 times in my 6 year career, 4 actual deployments and 1 small TDY. Every time I left for a deployment, I had a girlfriend. Every time I came home, I was single.
yeah,
So it's the way that life is. Granted, my deployments were, I 7, 8 months at a time. A lot of people are like, oh, Air Force, you deploy for 3, 4 months. No, 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 no. I was a cop in the Air Force. I deployed just like, the Marines, just like the Navy, 6 to 8 months at a time is how long I was gone for. Unlike the Army, who did year tours. But yeah, like I was gone for a good minute of my career. I've spent very little time stateside, so
Yeah,
that was how life was.
yeah, I get it. For me, I always wanted to serve. I was born into the military. As a matter of fact, I lived on military bases for the first 5 years of my life. Um, but one of the things that I saw, is the my dad trying to get me to think several moves ahead
Hmm.
was like, what do I want to do when I grow up? And it was like, I want to be in the military. But what I really wanted was to have a family, because, my parents divorced, I think, when I was 7. And so that was really, really important to me. And so I kind of had to balance those out. And honestly, I didn't see the military as being something that was going to be good for a family environment. And so that's one of the main reasons why I didn't do it, was because I really wanted the family more than the military experience. And yeah, I'm pretty sure you probably understand that,
It's
just like what you said, you go out, you know, in a relationship and you come back and you're not. And I didn't want that. Not at all. I wanted to know that whenever I came home that this was solid, and it was only getting better instead of worse.
yeah, there
Um,
was very few relationships flourished in the military. It was you were either dating somebody who came from a military background who understood it, and so they were like cool with you leaving for 6 8 months at a time, or you dated a person who was also in the military with you and they understood it. But a lot of that is hard because, in like, well, just for instance, my career field, people hated the cops. I mean, I had officers try to pull rank on me as an E3. I was an E4 for a little while. And these officers are like, I'm way above you, blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, your rank doesn't supersede my badge, you know.
right.
And you have these other people who just don't really like your career field, so you're kind of limited to the few people that do like you, and most of them are cops. And then you take the ratio of men as MPs to the ratio of women, and then the women who aren't also into women as well too. So like you are fighting against like every fiber of a relationship while you're in. And I realized that real fast that unless you're like a back office nobody who's never going to deploy, the military is not a life to cultivate a family. It is so far above and beyond that. It's not even funny. You do not want to start a family in the military unless you are absolutely 100% sure that you both can withstand it. And I'm talking from both sides of the field, whether you're a father or wife, it doesn't matter. I've seen stay-at-home dads, of women officers leave their wives because they just can't handle it. And it's like, well, I get that. It is not a place to cultivate a family at all, man.
Yeah, yeah. It kind of brings me into this next question. We're kind of traveling down this path of, you
Yeah.
know, where fathers are kind of portrayed, I guess. And so one of my questions, in movies and televisions, there's this tendency for father figures to be portrayed as absent or maybe in a negative life. Um, we've kind of already gotten down to like, here's what happens in real life, but
Hmm.
where do you stand on that as far as movies? Do you think that really holds true to real life as far as like, that father figures are kind of bad? And I'll preface that with like the Disney equation. There's so many
Hmm.
Disney
Hmm.
movies. I don't know why I bring it up, but I think I saw it somewhere. But where all these Disney movies, the fathers are absent, they're gone, and then they're all, if they are mentioned at all, it's pretty negative. And as a father figure, and as a father, it's like, man, I get where people kind of feel like different races or
Yeah.
cultures or sexes or religious categories are kind of marginalized in movies. And it's not to say that those movies don't serve a purpose and that story wouldn't be as good without what they said. But do you- am I the only one, or have you seen this too, where it seems like like the dads are just not good people and they're gone?
Yeah, I'll just preface this by saying I absolutely hate Hollywood with an absolute passion. Hollywood, and the power of love. I hate that so much. It's just everything is solved by the power of love, the power of willpower, and it's like, yeah, this happens one out of like every like 500,000 attempts. But like, you Hollywood, in my opinion, gets so many things incorrect, but it's almost like it has to work for the storyline. Um, I mean, you take movies like Don't Look Up. You take movies like The Day After Tomorrow. You take a look at some of those movies where there's these massive, just glaring stereotypes about everything that's out there, and you're like, oh, it has to work for the movie, and that's how I feel. Like, whoops, sorry, I'm really good at always hitting my microphone. Um, you take a look. You take a look at these stereotypes. I mean, stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason. They
Right.
happen all the time. And I'm not saying that it's a positive thing. I'm not saying it's a negative thing, but that's how you can make things work in Hollywood. Because I mean, if they told a lot of the true stories, they're not that interesting. They just are not. Like I've seen because I'm a big in the military. You take a look at like Zero Dark 30 or Lone Survivor, or 13 Hours. You take a look at some of those movies, and then like you get the like 10-15 minutes of action, and then they cut to a little bit of silence, and they'll be like 5 hours later. And it's like, yeah, it's bits and pieces of sheer utter chaos, followed by lots and lots of quiet and silence. And you don't want to show off those bits and pieces of quiets and silence that are just boring. You want to show the parts that matter and how they matter. That's why they always do, oh, we have no time to explain. And then they cut forward, and the main characters have talked to everybody because they had that 7 hour drive to get where they're going to explain everything on the way, you
Yeah.
know? And you don't, I mean, of course, we're already privy to it, but Hollywood, just in general, in my eyes, is disgusting with how they do a lot of things nowadays. I am not happy with a lot of what Hollywood is doing, and I find myself rewatching older shows and older movies and older TV shows because I feel like they do it better. Um, the
I
gratuitous
I
sex
agree about
scenes
the
and
older
stuff.
movies,
Yeah,
especially the ones that they've remastered. They look like they were done yesterday.
I know.
In some ways, like the Alfred Hitchcock movies.
Oh, so good.
As a kid, I was just like boring. I'm like, I would like not even my cup of tea. But now it's like I watched Vertigo a couple years back, and like it's remastered in 4K on Turner Classic Movies. I'm like, this is like one of the best movies I've ever seen in my life. This is
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah. It's that storytelling, man. It's that storytelling. Like I was about to go on a rant, so I'm glad you stopped me there. But just some of the graphic and gratuitous scenes that are in movies nowadays that just don't need to be there. You like you take a look at some of the stuff, and you're just like, it does. You don't need to do that. Just have them kiss and close the door. I don't need to see that dude's head explode. I don't need to see all this crazy nonsense out there. Like, just keep it to the storytelling like you used to in the old movies because that was good. That is how you tell a story. That is how you make a movie with good storytelling.
Let me ask you, so are you a fan of Lord of the Rings at all?
I have the extended edition.
Okay. All right. I heard the sigh and I was like, this could either be a big yes or this could be a big no.
If I have the extended edition of something, I love it. I absolutely love it. It's just I feel like such a nerd because like I've done that where I'm like Sunday is Lord of the Rings Day.
Awesome. So I watch a podcast called, I'm sorry, not a podcast, YouTube channel. It's called Nerd
Hmm.
of the Rings. And I would, and if you're into Lord of the Rings at all, for our listeners, amazing YouTube channel. It will spoon feed you everything that about the Lord of the Rings. And when I say Lord of the Rings, that's if you've ever heard of Silmarillion, and you've tried to pick up that book, you're like, oh my God, I can't even comprehend this. This YouTube channel does a really good job, an extremely good job about explaining all the bits and pieces of it. But the reason why I'm spinning off into this tangent
Hmm.
is because I was watching his review on the photos and the interviews about the new Lord of the Rings show. And one of the things that he was very apprehensive about was that this show was going to be Game of Thrones. And
Hmm.
so I think the producers of the show had actually got fielded that question. They were like, no, it's not going to be like Lord of the Rings. Or I'm sorry, it's not going to be like Lord of the Rings. And wouldn't that be a hell of a thing to say about the show? Not going to be about, it's not going to be like Game of Thrones and have those like sex and violence beats like every 5 minutes or
Yeah.
whatever. And so I was super impressed by that. And I totally get where you're coming from. Like Game of Thrones, I enjoyed it, but did it really have to have all that stuff?
It it did because it wanted to appease certain types of audiences, and they wanted to draw in certain types of audiences. I have a firm belief that no matter how religious we are, and no matter how crazy we are, what standpoint we are all perverts on some form and level,
Of
you know.
course.
And you throw a little bit of that in there, and it all stands. It sells. It absolutely sells. Um, and I saw a little thing. I saw a little snippet about the new Amazon Lord of the Rings thing, and I'm just looking at it. And I'm like, ah. And this guy had made a really brilliant point. So here's kind of like a little bit of a cut if you want to cut this out here, but it was a dwarf of a different color and
Yeah.
a different race. And he was like, well, if there were dwarfs of a different race back then, that would mean that at one of the great wars that they had, there must have been a huge purge. And I was like, that makes an interesting statement, because it lends itself to how whitewashed Lord of the Rings was. I will say that, yes, it was very whitewashed, but the biggest thing that I always liked about these people that do deep dives on things are when they talk about the female dwarves, like how they look, they act, and everything else like that.
Yeah.
I
Do they
want
have
them.
beards?
They have beards. They're very hard to tell from other men. When they go out, they're cloaked, and you can't really tell. Like, I want them to stay true to the books, and
Yeah.
how they're written, because that's what makes storytelling so great. There's a book. There was a book that I read that I totally had no idea was about a black platoon in Vietnam, but it was just so good that I had no
Mm.
idea that it wasn't an entire platoon of black soldiers. I think it was Fallen Angels, is what it was called, Fallen Angels. I thought, there was a whole mix of people. I thought, there was that typical Texas guy. There's the guy from New York, the guy from California, the guy from, Montana. And I thought it was this whole crew of ragtag individuals. And, through my seventh reading, I finally realized, oh, that's a nifty little twist. That makes sense about a lot of the nicknames, And it's still a great book. It still holds up. But like, if they were to make a movie about it, I know exactly what they would do, and I don't want them to do that. I want them to stay true to the book.
Yeah.
Stay true to the source material. Hollywood, for the love of God, that's how you keep the fans.
So speaking of which,
Hmm.
I didn't even think about, and thank you for this, Jared, because
Yeah,
you've spurned my development of these interview questions. But you know, for me, like movies and TV are that's a big part of who I am. But having really good father portrayed type things, like these are positive portrayals of fathers or whatever. And
hmm
I have a feeling that what I'm about to tell you, you're going to be like, at least I hope. I think you'll probably be like, yeah, I'm with you on this one. Um, so when you say Hollywood, are you specifically talking, more the modern Hollywood and movies, or are you talking about entertainment in general and streaming services and episodic television in general, or are you specific to like the Hollywood blockbuster movie type of paradigm of that storytelling?
everything in general. Whether it
Okay.
be the Netflix machine, whether it be Hulu, Paramount Plus, HBO Max, any of those guys, anybody who creates content for us to indulge, whether it be half-hour TV shows or 6-hour sagas like Ozarks. I don't, I don't care. Hollywood is the creators of our entertainment.
All right. So let me challenge you with this. And I'll preface what I'm about to say with the fact that I did not like this series the first time I saw it. Like I saw the preview for it and I was like, this is crap. I'm not going to like this. I don't want to watch this. And another point of usually whenever I say that, for some reason, I end up loving those things. So it's absolutely crazy. But I'll let the cat out of the bag. The series that I'm referring to in this case is Bosch on Amazon.
Never seen
I
it.
don't. Okay, I would highly recommend that you see it. To me it is it would be in your wheelhouse
Okay.
definitely. But here's what happened. Yeah, I think it was Amazon pilot season or whatever. They had these other far cooler shows that I thought were much more interesting. And I watched part of Bosch. I was like, nah, nah. I was like, whatever. And then I ended up finding out more about it, that it was a series of books that had been out for quite a while. And that the guy that wrote the books is actually like a writer on the show. And he actually is there for every episode, and he's a technical advisor on this other stuff. And I was like, well, maybe I'll give it a another chance. Well, I watched the entire first season, and then I started reading all of the books. And then
Nice.
I was so into it, and the books fell in line with the TV show so well, um, that I was like, I finish a book at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm buying the next book, and I start reading it. I'm like, I got to get it up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm still going after it.
Nice.
Um,
Nice.
it's a great series. It's about he's a former tunnel rat,
Hmm.
um, and so in the books he was a tunnel rat in Vietnam, and he's been a LAPD detective for a long time, working robbery or homicide, and he ends up finding out that he's got a daughter with his ex-wife. Didn't
Hmm.
know about it, and spoiler alert, she ends up getting killed at some point early in the series and in the books. And so he's the single father, and he's doing everything he can to take care of her. But at the same time, he's one of those very obsessive cops that like finding out, taking care of I think his saying was, everybody counts or nobody counts when it
Yeah.
talks about murder victims and stuff like that. And so he's just really great role model, um, with obvious character flaws, but he's a really great father. Like he's that kind of guy. Although it's got the Hollywood aspects of it, but the guy who wrote the books, Michael Connelly, was a he was a crime beat reporter. I think for the L.A. Times, and so a lot of his stuff is real world L.A. and like a lot of the books are things that aren't really exciting, like going
Hmm.
to eat pancakes. um,
I would like
and
to read that part though.
yeah,
How can you write and make eating pancakes enjoyable?
I'll tell you why, because he gives some of the best advice I've ever heard on pancakes. I don't know if I've ever heard advice on pancakes in general, but he gives it to his daughter. And I do this now. I don't do it every time, but I do this. But what he does is he gets pancakes, and he gets two plates. He gets an empty plate. He takes the empty plate and he covers the entire bottom of the plate with syrup. Then he puts his pancake on top of it. And I was like, and he explains why it tastes good, because like it's consistent, it's not falling off and that type of stuff, and it soaks up
Hmm.
into the pancake. And I tried it, and I was like, damn, what great advice. And it's like,
Well,
so I
I.
challenge you to read those books, to watch the show, and to try that pancake uh, advice, because it was amazing. And so but it gave me like an element of, this is like everyday stuff. This
Mhm.
is like beyond like the high points and the fight scenes and the shootouts and stuff like that that invariably happens. There's the real life things that are going on, the little things. And for me, the
Yeah.
little things mean the most. It's like the major things or whatever that go on. I don't really think about those so much. I really think about the little things, like this conversation. I'm
Mhm.
going to be playing it back in my mind. It's like, what are the odds that I talk to some guy who I know nothing about, and we have so common similarities, in having a child, out of wedlock, and you know that type of stuff. It's bizarre, and
Mhm.
if we had an earthquake today, I'd still be thinking about this conversation.
That's dope. That's like, yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I've done a few other podcasts where I've talked about certain similar things that kind of go along this lines, along, the birds, and I will frequently re-listen to those podcasts just to kind of relive those conversations. And maybe it's the nihilist in me, maybe it's just because I like to relive those moments. But this is definitely a conversation, Thomas, that I'm going to most assuredly revisit a few times throughout the next couple of weeks.
And thank you for that. I mean, I'm I'm ecstatic to hear you say that. That makes me feel good, but it also makes me feel a little bit more validated that podcasting in general, like the stuff that you do and stuff that I do, potentially is helping other people, and maybe, our perspectives and our thoughts are helping them in a positive way. And really, before the show, me and Jared were talking about, that the show is careful because I almost said it's a not safe for work show. It's a
Yeah.
safe for work show. But that oh crap, I lost it.
That's all right. It'll come back in a little bit. You could always snippet it out and be like, "Yeah, this was the thought I had." Because I've done that before, where I had a thought randomly pop in mid edit, and I threw it in there. It may not
Oh,
sound the smoothest, but
I remember where I was going with this, but that me and Jared share the love of not safe for work conversations. And I was telling him that, the reason why I do the show is because I want it to be a positive type of thing that people can learn from. And don't get me wrong, I would love to
hmm
not say, or to say things that probably would never be part of what this podcast is. But in our own way, whether your podcast is safe for work or not safe for work, the perspectives and the thoughts that we have in these interviews can really change the world, and hopefully for the better. So that's really all I'm getting at, and I'm going to keep all that in. I don't believe in editing a lot of stuff because it's just like what we were talking about, like with the pancakes.
hmm
Sometimes it is these little things and these little conversations. Um, I'm not too big into um, Hollywoodizing a podcast into making it like, oh, well, it's slick and cut and that type of stuff. Sometimes it's the warts and the little weird things that really kind of make more sense. And I'll show you how deep down the Star Wars rabbit hole I go. The episode of, I'm sorry, I'm so into the word episode now. The Empire Strikes Back, the movie. There's a guy holding a an ice cream churn. I forget what they call it,
hmm
but it showed up in all the Mandalorian and Boba Fett things, and it was something little that fans were into, and now it's like become like an
The East.
invaluable part of Star Wars. And so that was like a wart. It was something weird. It wasn't, somebody could have easily cut that. And now it's like,
hmm
that's great. We love it. We'll try and put in as many scenes as we can.
The little Easter egg for everybody to find. Can you find all the Easter eggs? Yeah, just like
Right.
South
Yeah.
Park has got an alien in almost like every episode.
I didn't know that. I'm not a big South Park, South Park fan, but no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there like I don't know if it's like every episode, but there are a lot of episodes early on when there are just hidden aliens in the background where they're there for maybe just a split second, and then they're gone. But yeah, they hide aliens all the time in some of their stuff. I don't know if they do it for the most recent episodes, but I mean maybe I'm just dating myself here. Now, speaking of safe for work content, though, for your listeners, if they do check out Feathers and Friends, do not expect to be in a safe for work environment. That it is very not safe for work. I fly off the handle. I use pejorative terms that probably should not be used in today's day in society. And I think you may have guessed it from one of the first parts. The people I threw out there, I do some interviews where it is very not safe for work content. So just be aware of that going into it.
I'll tell you what, if you would tell our listeners how they can find you. So I know that you're on Spotify. I'm assuming
Yep.
you're probably on other big platforms like Apple Podcasts and other stuff.
As far as I'm aware, I'm on all major 8 platforms: Apple, Spotify. You can even go out to YouTube if you like watching some of the videos that I do, where you can actually see me interview some of these people. Usually, I interview people over Zoom. So if you go to YouTube, it's Parrot Gaming Productions. If you just look me up on any major platform for podcasts, it's Feathers and Friends. You'll see my little logo. You'll see 2 little birdies. You'll know it's me. So
Well, awesome, Jared. Well, I truly appreciate you coming on my show. I think this has been a fantastic episode, warts and all. Hopefully, people have found the Easter eggs and all our little conversations. But thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Oh, well, thank you, Thomas, for inviting me. And I'm glad I figured out that you were talking about today and not next Saturday, the 19th. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I totally
sorry.
get that. No,
I had to throw that jab in there, big guy. Had to.
it's it's okay. I will tell you this: I have far too many calendars in way too many different places, and yeah, but it's only going to make me better because I'm totally going to use that tool now. I'm going to be like, okay, I'm going to start using that. That makes perfect sense. So, um, for one of many things that I'm going to take away from this conversation. So kudos to you. Thank you, Jared.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure, Thomas. Thank you very much.
All right. So be sure to subscribe to You're Not My Father and get your weekly dose of You're Not My Father. We're also available wherever fine podcasts are sold, given away, or bartered in exchange for chips and dip. If you found this podcast useful, please spread the word on social media. Tell your friends, pets, anybody else who will listen. And in Jared's case, tell your birds. You can also follow us on facebook.com/YNMF show. And that's it for us at You're Not My Father. Remember, if you're a fan of us, then we're a fan of you. Take it easy, stay positive, and remember, good vibes only.